Welcome back, everyone, to Random's Thoughts. We're jumping into Runestrike with some new content, as in new to me, an experience that I haven't really tried to do before. I know that pack openings and box breaks and things along those lines are popular in other games, and I figured I'd give it a try here since I'm just starting out on my Runestrike journey. Now, as mentioned in my initial impressions video, I was recently accepted to the content creator program, so as a result, I happen to have bunch of packs to open. So we're going to try cracking them today and see what we get. Since I'm really just starting out and I don't know what I'm doing as far as Runestrike goes, as far as what's good, what's bad, what interactions am I looking for, what decks are popular, that sort of thing, I'm just very much leaning on existing card game experience. So we're going to jump in and try and evaluate this stuff, and then over the next few weeks and months as I continue to play, we'll see if I knew what I was talking about. So let's jump into it. So, as you'd imagine, here is our pack opening menu. So we have a variety of different packs down here, and we'll go left to right. We have a myth pack, chaos packs, well, 3 of each of these, or a legend pack, shadow pack, nature, light, a season pack, and core packs. Now going right to left, let me talk a little bit about where these come from. So the core pack is, as you'd imagine, the basic, well, core set pack. You can see them here. You can get them. Whoop! Accidentally bought one, so we got an extra one to open up. But the core pack, as you can see here, it'll have 6 runes, which are cards. At least one is guaranteed rare. Each pack is a 20% chance of getting an epic and a 5% chance of getting a legendary. The usual colors that you'd expect to see: blue is rare, purple is epic, and orange is legendary. So, what are the other packs that we have available to us? Well, there's also the season pack. Now, this comes from your Path of Glory. Now, I brought it up in my initial impressions video, but I did splurge and get the upgraded Path of Glory. So we're going to get top track rewards, including the season pack here, in addition to the bottom track rewards. So the next one up happens to be these shards and a small elixir. But we have season packs that are coming up, and season packs do offer these particular cards. Now, there's a few of these in here that, again, I don't really know what I'm doing yet, but I'm very excited about some of them because due to the advantages of being in a digital format, Runestrike is able to have mechanics that present you with cards that you may not necessarily own. So, for example, there are cards that will generate beasts, and some of the beasts, every once in a while, will be a Tauric War Leader, and I had some success with it, so I'm excited to see if we open it up and what options we have on that front. There are legendaries, including Burn, here available, and some epics: Cold Week, Feast or Famine. We already own Savage Soul, so we happen to have this particular epic, but there's a diversity of rarities available for these season packs. So, aside from the season packs, we have various faction packs. So you have your 6 factions, and they are skewed to being that particular faction, as you'd imagine. So we're going to open up this myth pack here. Now, one of the interesting things is that this game will automatically crunch, and I use that term when I play a lot of digital card games, into the components, which in this case is essence, cards that you already have duplicates of, as compared to forcing you to go through the UI and then remember to do it again yourself. So, ooh, I see some interesting things. So we got a common here in Pixie Dust. Target friendly minion gains flight. Okay, some evasion. Probably decent and limited, I would assume, or some sort of limited format, but not... I would imagine this is not going to be important in constructed. I could be wrong.
Rare.
We got a rare. It's a Realm Walker. And the Realm Walker is, after you cast a spell, draw a rune. This I've seen and been on the other end of. And it seems, you know, engine-type cards like this are interesting to me. And this could have a lot of potential. I like the idea. Obviously, in card games, the most powerful things that you can generally do across pretty much all card games are extra resources and extra cards. Because if you have either or both, then you can start to do some relatively obscene things. Anybody who's played card games before will probably attest to that as well. So this is pretty interesting. The body obviously is, it's going to have to be understated for this slot, or otherwise it's just going to be too strong. So we'll see.
Rare.
Next, we have Illusionist. Again, this is a myth pack, so it's going to provide cards of that particular faction. So the Illusionist has native evade, and after you cast a spell, this gains evade. So it gives you a somewhat sturdy early minion, given the fact that it's difficult for it to immediately be removed in combat, and then you can continue to ensure that it's not going to be hit in combat due to the fact that myth, you can kind of see it leans into playing spells. So this is kind of cool. I like this. I wonder if there is an aggressive myth-based deck that just kind of protects the bodies in this way. You clear a path with, say, burn or other effects to keep pushing, and if your opponent presents something that you can't necessarily push through right away, you give something like Illusionist evade.
Epic.
We do see an epic here. And this is Gorgon Sister, which is actually kind of cool. So the war cry here is pretty interesting. The opposing minion, so it's somewhat targeted removal, is permanently stunned and gains Suffer 2. So permanently is very interesting. Suffer 2 means it will not die immediately, but will get there eventually. So this is pretty cool. It's a unique way to provide removal on a body without just saying, kill that thing. It's flavorful because it's a Gorgon. It also presumably plays in well to the flavor of the faction, so you're not, you know, I am always and still am of the opinion that every faction in every card game should be able to do everything. And I know that's not a commonly held opinion. I personally feel that every faction should be able to draw cards, should be able to remove things, whether it's minions or other card types, depending on the game. They should be able to participate in all the different facets of the game, but in their own unique faction flavorful way. So as we look at more myth cards, we'll see if this is a recurring theme, but it's kind of cool that you have this and it's not necessarily just comes out and nukes something. So as mentioned, we got some extra essence. We'll move on to the next pack. One thing I will say is that I do wish there was an open all option, but if I'm going to continue to do these pack openings, obviously I'll be doing them one by one. So we got a bunch of dupes, but we also opened a Hatchling Drake, which is new to me. It's a 3/2 flight for 3 after a friendly dragon to summon this gains +1/+1. I love tribal cards. If anybody is watching this that has been on one of my streams, has watched any of my other videos, listened to any of the podcasts, both my wife and I love tribal decks, and they're a lot of fun. So it's pretty cool to see something like this. It encourages building into this particular pattern. I think it's also important from a game design perspective that it's a flag post or signpost card that says, hey, new player, how much do you like dragons? You want to build a dragon deck? Because you want to include this in your dragon deck. This will help you get started on your dragon deck. So go make a dragon. You know, it's difficult for people who've been playing card games for a long time to understand that at one point when you started out, you didn't know what the hell you were doing. Maybe if you're like me, you still don't know what you're doing. But if you really have no clue, sometimes it's very daunting to just go, I have all these cards. I have no idea what to do. Well, here's an easy way to bring somebody in, just kind of gently nudge them in a direction, or maybe hit them over the head by saying, hey, play dragons. This goes with dragons. So it's cool to see that. I like that. So we got a rare here. Another Realm Walker. So we have our set. What is this?
Legendary.
This is Mortal Exchange. Mortal Exchange is a 4-cost spell. Discard the lowest mana cost minion in your hand. If this happens, summon the highest mana cost minion in your void. This is very interesting. I can see why it's a legendary. It isn't always necessarily about power when you're talking about rarity. Sometimes it is just complexity requirements. So you don't want to overwhelm, again, newer players with really weird effects, unique effects, because oftentimes it's, if you're just starting out, it's, what do I do with this? I don't even understand what's happening here. Obviously, someone who's more well-vetted with card games can see where the potential power here is. Turns your late-game top decks of your early game stuff into, oh, you removed my whatever. Guess what? It's back for another trip, and especially due to the limited quantity of things you have in this game, copies of cards, this turns into copy 3, copy 4, that sort of thing. So we'll move on. We'll open up our last myth pack and see what we crack here. So I should look at this first. We opened 2 rares. We got a bunch of dupes. You do get to see them briefly, but we don't know what those were.
Rare.
So we have a Satyr Bard, which is actually, I think, really cool. This card has caused me some consternation when playing against it. I have built my usual game plan when I start out a game, which is build the aggro deck. Build whatever I can, and then go from there. So, as you'd imagine, I'm not super excited when my opponent plays Satyr Bard and then is able to try and flip the momentum and take the game back under control. But eventually I'll be building slower control decks. Eventually I'll be building mid-range things, and this is pretty cool to see.
Rare.
And we open another Illusionist, which is also exciting because now we have multiple copies. We can actually try and see if maybe this myth-based aggressive list is a thing. So, let's move on and open some Chaos packs. Let's see how much fun we can have with a little disorder. So, we actually have a whole pack this time. We don't... I was going to say we have a whole pack. We didn't get any dupes, but we do have something purple hiding back here. We'll save that for last. So, we got Heavy Ballista. It's still, so for anybody not familiar, you can see here, this minion never attacks. Defender, walls, whatever, if you're coming from other games. So you'll probably get the idea. It's a ballista, it's not really going to move. And Rally, which is triggers at the start of your turn, which is a keyword that I really like. I enjoy this sort of thing where you can have these powerful abilities, but it is delayed, so your opponent has an opportunity to somewhat respond. And then the longer that your opponent doesn't address it, you're accruing additional value. So I like it. Now, Rally, in this case, is deal 4 damage to the enemy champion, so this is pushing a lot of direct damage, very thematic. This is the... I don't know if it's accurate to call it the aggressor faction, but I'm playing red-green right now, or Chaos Nature, and it's a pretty aggressive build. I don't think this would particularly fit in it, because despite being a large back end, this still seems like it's going to be pretty slow. It's obviously not doing anything when it comes out, and I would imagine as I climb the ranks, there's going to be more direct removal that's going to show up. But maybe this will work at the lower ranks, and we'll see how it goes. Or there'll be more construct support. Now, this particular pack, we open up double acid spray. Target minion gets suffer 2, so target a removal, but it doesn't necessarily require doing damage. It doesn't have a immediately destroy effect. Now, the reason why that matters is you might need to be able to get around certain things. Obviously, burn has limitations on larger enemies. Additionally, there might be keywords that I'm not aware of or minions that I'm not aware of yet that cannot just be directly removed, and this might get around it. So it's cool to see, again, that it's a flavorful or somewhat flavorful option in the faction that does not... It allows everything, again, every faction, every color, to do quote-unquote everything. I like seeing that sort of stuff.
Rare.
So what rare do we got? We got Pillar of Flame. Target minion is dealt damage equal to your attack. So, again, damage-based removal, flavorful. I like this. It's actually something I was hoping to open because I didn't have enough resources to craft everything I wanted for the first build that I put together. So let's take a look at the other rare. We got Annihilate, which sounds awesome. It's also an extra copy. So we got 40 Essence, which is pretty cool. Annihilate allows you to remove larger minions. Again, it's limited removal. Maybe, again, is the wrong way to put it. But in limiting removal, making it more unique as opposed to just universally valuable, it allows more builds to thrive and more metagame shifting to exist, more tweaking to happen, and I like when those things are available. It allows you to choose, well, I expect to see a lot of this particular build in an event, so I'll run this. It's not terrible against other stuff, but it's obviously weaker, whereas if I expected deck B, C, D, E, whatever, those would require different answers.
Epic.
Let's see what that epic is. A Devourer. This thing actually looks really cool. I really like this. I don't know what this is. Offhand, I'm not sure what monster this is supposed to be. But Consume, which is a keyword that I don't think I've owned any cards yet to this point that have it. But Consume is this minion may be played on top of an existing friendly minion. If it is, destroy that minion and trigger any specified ability. Which in this case, it gets +2/+1, so it becomes a 6/8. That's pretty solid, given that it has another positive ability, but Consume also has value on at least 2 fronts. that I can immediately think of. One is I've encountered a number of scenarios where I filled up my board and my opponent is just not being cooperative, and I need to remove something that was valuable early in the game, but could be a liability sitting out there later in the game. Since this could just remove it, great. We just eat it and move on with our lives with the Devourer, which is pretty cool. We get a cool looking monster. Because you end up removing that threat, or excuse me, removing the previous threat and now nothing else, you eliminate some options for your opponent. It also allows you to free up cards from your hand, because if you max your hand size, you won't be seeing new cards, so it allows you to continue playing things. But next we'll talk about Frenzy, which is another keyword that I have seen a lot of, and it's trigger an ability when this minion attacks and kills another minion. I always mentally, it's just, for some reason I think when Frenzy attacks, you just get the thing. It's going to take a little while and probably me screwing it up a few more times before that finally sinks in. But this is pretty cool. It's nice to get multiple keywords. We'll see if this ends up being a thing. Since it's a monster, and a lot of the build that I've been working on right now is beast-centric, I don't know if this will find a home, but I'm sure there's other decks that will utilize this. So let's move on to our next Chaos pack. Alright. We get a bunch of dupes, so we're only looking at 2 cards here, 2 rares.
Rare.
Let's see what we got. So we have an Ember Mage. This is new, as you can see there. It has a War Cry, which is when it comes out, it does something. Friendly minions gain counter 2, deal 2 damage to the attacking minion, which is counters an ability that triggers after you survive an attack. Since minions don't deal damage back when they defend in Runestrike, this is very interesting, and it allows you to try and remove things much more easily. So I could see where this fits in as either a mid-range to control option for Chaos builds, or it could be something aggressive just to help try and clear a path, as in you're pressuring, your opponent drops a huge blocker, you play this, your minions get in, damage them, and then when your opponent's minions attack, they might get the counter, but that's where the caveat comes in. It's not very likely. Your minions, of course, are going to be smaller, so they'll probably die because you have to survive. So, again, mid-rangey control stuff. I kind of like this. It might be difficult because you have to ensure that your minions live, but I could see it having value. Since it shares 2 tribes, Mage and Priest, there might be synergies there that we can take advantage of, but we'll have to see. So the other rare that we have here is Deranged Savant. So this shows up in the campaign. Well, this character anyway. Each time you cast a spell, deal 1 damage to all minions, including this. And I actually like these symmetrical cards. I love them in pretty much every game that I play, because it's fun to try and find ways to break the symmetry. Clearly, you are prepared for having Deranged Savant. Your opponent may not be. And I know for a fact there are other cards that deal this widespread AoE damage. So we're going to have to be on the lookout and see what other ways we can use to leverage this. But we'll move on to our final Chaos pack. What do we got here? What exciting new toys do we have? Well, we have some old toys. So we have 2 rares. 2 red rares. What are we opening here? Let's see.
Rare.
So we have Crazed Alchemist, which is, again, something we apparently already had.
Rare.
And another Crazed Alchemist. So instead, we end up with a whole lot of essence, which isn't bad, because that means that we are accruing more essence, which will, again, allow us to get ever closer to the things we truly want. Like many other digital card games, there is this crafting system so that we can, if we aren't opening the cards we want, we can go make them. And believe me, there's a bunch of cards that I have my eyes on. So let's jump over to the From Chaos to Order. Order here, we again see a bunch of dupes, but we have a metal sprite. There are sprites in every faction. They have this fuse mechanic, which means that if you play it next to a minion with the same name, they combine into a single, more powerful version of those minions. I haven't seen it put to a whole lot of use just yet, but I'm anxious to see if this mechanic is a thing, because it's a very unique idea and something that is probably easier to grok, easier to implement in a digital card game, at least from a board clarity standpoint, than it would be in a physical game. So this one is, as I said, fuse and bury. Give all your minions 1 shield. So shield, obviously, as the name would imply, and as you can see on screen, will prevent some damage. 1 shield isn't a whole lot. I'm assuming when you combine them, it'll give 2 shield, which is still not spectacular. But again, I'm curious to see if these spirits, maybe there's a spirit deck, there's a fuse deck, or there's just other things that key off of this where you can recycle these for more value.
Rare.
So let's see what our other rare is. It's a blinding spirit, similarly with fuse, but this time bury, your minions get 2 shield. So presumably, again, this will double. I'm not sure, but we'll have to keep an eye out. So we got some spirits to add from the order faction. So what's our second order pack present us with? I see some purple. I see some purple. I also see a puppy. Anybody who's a recurring viewer, listener, will know that I love dogs. My wife loves dogs. So seeing this beast here, it makes me warm and fuzzy inside. The war cry here is if you have a soldier in play, it gains Blitz. Blitz is in all games that I have played where this mechanic exists, where it's this type of game where minions attack other minions directly. Blitz, ferocity, rush, whatever it happens to be, is always the most powerful mechanic because it allows you to do something unexpected and leaves the body. Now, war cries, obviously, the Blitz is tied to the war cry here, and it's conditional. War cries are often pretty close because they, again, allow you to set up X for ones, set up maybe not necessarily game-breaking plays, but potentially game-breaking because you're advancing your board position while impacting your opponents. And that's why Blitz is so big. So anytime I see Blitz, my eyes are going to light up. But my eyes are also lighting up for this purple, so let's get through this other rare first. We have Phalanx Formation. Your minions gain 1 shield for each friendly minion in play. So if you're playing a higher velocity build, or even if you have a sturdy enough board that you can fill all the lanes, you can potentially give up to 5 shields. That feels not good enough for 3, but I could be wrong. That being said, that assumes you have 5 minions out. What if you only have 2 minions out? I'd have to play with this to see. It feels like this is not quite good enough, but could be inexperience. So we got our purple here. What's our purple doing? What's our purple giving us? Our purple is Chained Soul. Fuse, which we've talked about. It's spirit. I guess Fuse is the spirit mechanic. And Bury, your minions gain shield 3. So again, it's probably 6 shield and 8, which is probably wouldn't be too difficult to set up, presumably. Obviously, your opponent could do a number of things to eliminate it, but you could, for example, play this in an off lane next to your opponent's minion, soak some damage, play the second Chain Soul, Fuse. I'm not sure which lane they go in. We'll have to see once either someone does it to us or we're watching or we're doing it. But this is interesting. This is interesting. I wonder how many recursion elements we're going to have available in the order faction to make pulling back buried minions possible. So let's move on to our final order pack. Alright, so we got a bunch of dupes, but we have a Charioteer. So its war cry is adjacent minions gain +1/+2. I like this a lot because it can potentially hit 2 minions, but it's going to require, obviously, having 2 minions available. It's a combat trick, which in the short time that I played with Runestrike, I've come to truly appreciate the combat tricks because you don't have minions striking back. You're able to then just eliminate, and again, similar to what I was explaining with Blitz, when you're able to just crush the opposition and then still maintain your own position, it requires that your opponent must have out of hand removal, they must have Blitz, or they must have just an enormous minion to now oppose the one that's going to get the first shot on theirs, thereby decreasing their health and setting it up for future damage. So I like this idea. The fact that it requires 2 other ones to really get full value, well, I mean, it's still probably good enough. 4 is kind of pushing it. I would think, but I think there's potential here. So we got 2 more rares.
Rare.
Take out the bottom one first. We have the Nile Princess. It has Veil, so it can't be targeted by spells or abilities, which is very cool. Protection on things is very important. And Rally, gain 1 blood. Now, I've also found that the blood abilities are often, maybe not bonkers, but verging on bonkers. And I haven't seen all of them, so maybe the primary ones that are used are all bonkers. But resource generation is important. This is a card that protects itself. The problem is that it comes down very late. Now, I'm playing an aggro deck currently, but even at the lower levels, just out-tempoing your opponent is often better. When I say lower levels, I'm talking lower ranks, playing against the bots, that sort of thing. But I could see where late game generating 2 blood a turn could very quickly make a big difference in your game plan. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on this. Noble Tribe here, which is interesting. I don't know how much support there is for that. I know I've seen other soldier cards, as we saw with the Good Boy earlier.
Rare.
So last order rare is the Trusted Vizier. 3 cost 1/4 with Rally. Opposing minion is stunned for 1 turn. Interesting. I'm not clear on this. Body seems unfortunate. You will get the first attack by stunning the opposing minion. Obviously buys you a turn. We haven't seen a whole lot of buffs that would make it so that we could just turn the Trusted Vizier into removal, quote-unquote removal, by punching the opposition. But this is interesting. I'm not super excited about this one, but maybe there's a bunch of other stun adjacent things that will allow us to take advantage of it. So I'm actually going to skip the Legend Pack, and we'll jump to Shadow. I want to save the Legend Pack. Hopefully I don't misclick. We'll jump into Shadow. So we see a whole bunch of dupes. I did catch some spirits there at first, but let's take a look at the rare that we open here.
Rare.
This is an Umbral Slasher, which is an undead, which immediately draws my attention because I play undead factions or cards in just about every card game. Again, I love tribal stuff. It happens to be undead that I like to play the most. So the war cry here is deal 2 damage to an opposing minion. If it has Veil, deal 5 damage instead. Now, at a 3 cost 3/2, dealing 2, I would think, is a solid amount of damage to alleviate yourself of a problematic card. Obviously, it's only dealing with initial stuff. This thing looks pretty mean. It looks like it's sliced off the horn of a unicorn back here. I'm guessing that's what happened. So, I like this thing. The Veil Hate, Veil Silver Bullet here is interesting. I wonder if that's just for this card, specific answer to this mechanic, or if this is a theme within the Shadow faction. But overall, I kind of like this, and I think there's some potential for this one. So we'll move on to our next pack. Big money, big money. No win. Apparently, lots of essence. We're getting lots of essence today, but we do have a rare. Let's see what rare we get. It's Entropy. Until your next turn, the enemy champion loses all attack. I could definitely see this being a potential tech card. I get the sense, based on some things that I've seen initially, that there are strategies that are quote-unquote solo. I don't know if that's actually feasible, but in other games where you have the ability for your champion to interact and to push damage either against your opponent or interact with the board, there tends to be this option where you can build a quote-unquote solo deck, just run it through spells, other equipment upgrades, whatever it happens to be for that game. I'm not sure if that's available in Runestrike, but if it is, this clearly could be a solid tech card against those sort of things. So we'll have to keep an eye on it, see if that materializes. So we'll look at our last Shadow Pack. Let's see what cards we have. A whole bunch of dupes and another rare. Let's see what rare we
Rare.
get. It's a Hex Master. It seems to always be when they have this sort of thing, it's cutting your palm or cutting, like, your forearm. But why cut your palm? I feel like, I don't know. It's just gotta hurt. I guess it's to get whatever they need. They gotta do what they gotta do. But it's a 2 cost 1/2 with War Cry. You lose 1 blood. Rally. Enemy champion loses 1 blood. So we saw earlier a blood ramp card. Here it's a anti-blood card. All of the blood abilities seem pretty important. I don't know. Obviously, if you can get this to trigger multiple times, you would be ahead. I don't know if disrupting your opponent is in this fashion is worthwhile enough, but it is cool that you can interact with all these different parts of the game. It's not strictly just we mash minions together and punch face. There are other ways to disrupt your opponent, try and leverage, or rather, to create advantages and leverage your different resources in ways, or prevent your opponent from leveraging their resources over the course of the game. So it's cool that this sort of thing exists. So that'll close it up for Shadow. What do we got next? It looks like we have Nature. So let's open up this Nature pack and see what we get. We get a bunch of dupes, and we got 2 rares. So let's take a look at the 2 rares. Take the left one first. Our Carnivorous Plant. I've only seen this card once in play. It's still, it doesn't move. It's an Earthen. It's a 5/8 for 3 that when it counters to deal damage equal to the minion's attack to the attacking minion. Now, given the size of this thing, this is a counter that's reasonable. It's unlikely that your opponent's going to be able to remove this early on. It seems like an anti-aggro card. It's still going to take the damage, so your opponent will eventually get through it, but it could end up being an extra one and or locking down a lane for a significant amount of time. When I played against it, I was fortunate enough to be able to play buffs to remove it relatively quickly without costing myself too much, but given that it costs only 3, I could see this potentially being pretty valuable. Since it doesn't necessarily remove itself and doesn't push damage, we're going to want to see other cards like we saw in our Chaos packs to devour this to get it out of the way later in the game, but this is something to keep in mind. And what is our other rare? Our other rare is Decomposed Spirit. It's a 3 cost, says your minions gain Berry. Add a random beast to your hand. I would imagine you need at least 2 minions out in order to do this, or to really want to do it. Trading 1 for 1 is not spectacular, as in it's the Decomposed Spirit for drawing 1. It just cycles for 3, which is typically a little bit more than you'd want to pay. However, you do get to select from one of 3 for this, so there's the potential you just hit the nuts and draw. Well, you add a random beast to your hand. It's not technically a draw. If you land this on 2 minions, it's replacing, well, maybe not replacing, because it's the 2 minions plus the Decomposed Spirit, meaning that you end up with a 3 for 2, which is okay. I don't think you're ever really going to realistically get a lot more than that, but potentially. Clearly, you could also set this up as an anti-sweeper. So if you have the opportunity, you overextend intentionally or unintentionally, you play this before they play the sweeper, and then all of a sudden your opponent's in a weird spot because they need to remove your board, but at the same time, you're going to be drawing, essentially, a whole bunch of cards. So this seems pretty cool. Definitely could see myself playing this potentially. Move on to the next pack. Next up in the Nature badge is what? Some dupes. We got a purple. We got a purple.
Rare.
So another Decomposed Spirit. Good news.
Rare.
We have Treant Goliath. Wouldn't most Treants be considered a Goliath? I don't know. But anyway, it's a 5/6 for 6 that has Vast, which allows it to block enemies with flight. The evasion in this game is definitely very interesting, especially given the fact that they interact with other minions in a unique way. While other minions wouldn't be able to block them, the flying minions don't necessarily deal damage back to the thing that it is opposing. So they could end up just getting chewed up by a ground minion despite the fact that they're evading and pushing damage. But Vast can certainly change that, so it's cool to see this keyword. Each time you summon an Earthen, this gets +1/+1. So again, I love tribal stuff. This is definitely up my alley. I would like to see how this works out. It seems flavorful that Treants, although it's an Earthen, but it's big enough that it can fight flying things. I don't know. It does seem a little weird there, but whatever. I'd like to see what the other ones are. Obviously, this comes down late enough that I don't know how useful that's going to be, because on turn 6, have you just emptied your hand? You don't have many more to play. We'll have to see. Maybe there's a bunch of draw effects that you can utilize to then refuel and make this even bigger. But what is our purple card? We have Ambush. Ambush is a 2 cost, Target friendly minion gains blitz and lethal until your next turn. Now, I'm personally always going to mix up lethal and dangerous, but lethal deals double damage to minions. So essentially you can try and remove something relatively quickly. I was going to say immediately, but obviously there'll be some limitations, although you're likely to just say, okay, I'm playing this thing out of hand, ambushing it, and then immediately getting in. So I like this idea, again, flavorful removal. It's unlikely that green, being nature, that it's going to have the, oh, I'm dealing X damage, unless you do the whole Mother Nature theme of, natural catastrophes, that sort of thing. But this seems flavorful because it relies on having other minions. It's close to regular removal because of the way combat works, so if you are able to just one-shot whatever it is that you're running at, you just get there. So I like this. This is really cool. We'll do our last nature pack. Let's see if we can pull another epic or legendary. Rare. Nope. So we have a bunch of dupes. Let's take a look at this rare. We have a Hedge Witch. The Hedge Witch is a 2-cost 1/4. After you cast a spell, your minions restore 1 health. So this is a interesting thing because it's a theme that I haven't really witnessed within this faction yet, but maybe Nature Myth is a build, and then you can try and supplement it because you're obviously going to be You're going to want to be spamming spells. This gives you another payoff for it. This is an interesting idea. I don't know if 1 health is enough, but it comes down early enough that you could play this as a blocker against aggro. It survives, then you cast 2 follow-up spells, let's say, and then it allows this minion to survive yet another attack, and then you eventually kill the 2 health thing on the other side. That may sound like a lot of work, but sometimes clearing out aggro minions in that fashion are necessary. I don't know if that'll be true for Runestrike, but there's still time to find out.
Rare.
So the next thing up is Circle of Life, which is a dupe, so we're not going to look at it. We'll just keep moving. So those are our nature packs. Let's take a look at the light packs. We have some dupes. We have a rare, we have a rare, and we have a rare.
Rare.
Let's see what rares we happen to unlock. A Celestial Giant. Now, I played against this card. It's a 5/7 for 6 with Flight, Vast, and Surface, which is a cool keyword. All other friendly minions in hand and in play gain 1 health. Now, Surface triggers when you draw it from your deck, which I think is really cool. It's definitely it can be done in physical card games, but clearly much easier in digital ones. I really like this. One thing that I would comment is I wish that they would stay revealed in players' hands, so your opponent knows that it's always there. Obviously, they get to see it, so they know that it happens, that you can see it on the game history track, but I would love it if it would just flip the card and let you see it. I like this card. It seems pretty cool. It lets you do a combat trick, or has a combat trick somewhat, even if it's a little random. But it has Flight and Vast, so definitely a lot of positive keywords, a lot of positive text. Next one up is Pegasus, classic beast. I was going to say monster. But it's a 3/7 for 5 with Flight and Warcry, gain 1 blood. So blood, as we talked about, is a pretty important effect resource. This still feels like it's a little small for the cost, but it has evasion, and again, I can respect the blood ability, so you could play this, hit the break point to play whatever your blood ability is, and then try and gain whatever advantage you were going for from there. So this is potentially workable. Plus, it's a beast, which there's a lot of things I care about it being beast. Maybe not in this faction. Don't know yet.
Rare.
Next one up is Miracle. 3-cost, target-friendly minion gains Resurrect, which means that when it dies the first time, it is resummoned, which, given that there's a lot of Warcry abilities or, abilities on the other end when minions leave play, this could be potentially very powerful. It gives you a cool combat trick. I want to play around with it because it seems like there's a lot of potential. I like this effect in other games. I like being able to reuse these sort of things in other games, but we'll have to see if it makes a difference in Runestrike. So our second light pack. Got our dupes. We got a purple. We got some purple.
Rare.
Let's take a look at the blues first. We got Tribal Elder with a 4-cost 1/4 with a war cry. Reduce the cost of your runes in your hand by 1. Again, runes are just the card. So it's an Amazon Noble, the Noble tribe coming back. The cost reduction is pretty cool. I could definitely see this in some of those spammier spell decks, or obviously any other spammier combo-centric or just heavy synergy-centric builds where, okay, I want to play these 3 or 4 things together on the same turn. This enables you to be able to power those things out, so this is kind of cool. The body, obviously, is kind of atrocious, but the power is potentially really insane, so this is very unique.
Rare.
Take a look at the other rare. The other rare is Ancestral Hero, which is a 6-cost 4/4 spirit with Guard and Resurrect. Guard is, as you'd imagine, the defensive keyword in this game. Unopposed minions must attack this minion instead of the champion. That's any lane, so you don't have to plop this in front of something, which is a cool idea. I haven't seen it on too many cards. Given that it has Resurrect, I'm not clear in general what the various keywords and other powers are costed at. Most games you're able to determine, okay, well, X amount of stats equals this cost, and then this keyword is roughly worth this amount of mana, and this keyword is worth that amount of mana plus 1 or minus 1, whatever it happens to be. So we'll have to see how this goes. Resurrect seems very powerful. Obviously, you can soak up 2 attacks, potentially way more depending on what the size of your opponent's minions are, but this is pretty interesting. Let's take a look at the purple one, though. What do we got for purple? We have Glimmerwing Codal. This looks really cool. I love this artwork. It's a 9-cost 5/12 Spirit Dragon. It has flight. You don't say. It has like 6 wings. It has Warcry. Conjure a random sprite. Fill your hand with copies of it. Really? So you're drawing anywhere from... Well, you could draw 0, I guess. No, you have to draw at least 1 because this would have been in your hand. Unless find some other way to get into play. So we'll say at least 1, even though I guess hypothetically it could be 0. Up to 8 sprites. Now, since they're random, could be anything, but I do like this sort of thing. It's a controlled variance, and I like this in digital card games where you have this option to generate cards but constrain the randomness so that, okay, it's at least within this range. Now, since I haven't seen this card, I don't know exactly how it works, whether your opponent sees what the sprites are or they just know that it's all sprites. It would be cool if, again, your opponent saw everything and then it just stayed there so that they could try and map their turns around it. But if that's not the case, it's not the end of the world. For a 9-cost minion, you need something this powerful. I have seen the sprite synergy up to this point a little bit, so I'm interested to see how that works. It's cool that you have these off-tribe things that help the tribe. Or maybe this is just good enough to play on its own. It's like, okay, I drew 8 cards. Drawing 8 cards is a lot of cards. Like, that could be really good. And because it doesn't come out of your deck, you could, or you avoid, potentially, running out of cards and then taking damage that way. So you find a lot more gas without having to utilize cards that were already in your deck. That's pretty exciting. I like that. This is really cool. So what is our last pack have in store for us? So we have some dupes, and then we got 2 rares. Oh, these are new. These are not dupes. So we have Luminous Sprite, so the sprite in another faction. Fuse, which we talked about. And this one's you gain 2 life, 2 health. So I could see this being useful if there are payouts for gaining life. Similar to the other ones, it just depends on what other triggers key off of it. Otherwise, okay. Maybe life gain is a thing, and usually is not, but we'll see. Now, Beacon of Hope is a 2-cost spell. Target friendly minion restores 4 health. Draw a rune. Draw a card. This is seemingly innocuous, but could break combat. Now, since you don't take the damage back in combat, it's a little bit different in Runestrike compared to other games, whereas other games, when the minions strike back, having the extra 4 health there means that you live. Since if you are living to attack, and you're going to kill the opposing minion anyway, it's not as much value, but can still be very relevant. So, and plus it replaces itself, so you don't hate yourself too much about this. So let's see what our rares are. The first one up here is Mustering Grounds. It's a 2-cost spell. Your minions gain Berry. Your champion gains 1 blood. So this, depending on the effects of your champion's abilities, this could be pretty big, and it costs cheap enough as compared to some of the other blood-related boosts that we saw and generators. This is pretty cheap, so you could squeeze it in on a turn when you're doing other things, as well as it happens relatively immediately, as opposed to the rally effect we saw earlier where we need something to live. This actually counts on things dying, so I like this more than the other one, and it could be potentially very powerful.
Rare.
The other rare is another copy of Miracle. As we talked about, Miracle seems like it's pretty good. So that'll do it for these. So we have our season pack, which we'll save. Let's open up some core packs. So here's the long haul. Let's jump into some core packs. I'm saving the other two, the legend pack and the season pack. I'm excited, but let's open these other ones. So we got a core pack. Core pack numero uno. We did see a Drea Catchling there briefly, but it's an extra copy. So we have 3 rares. Let's jump into the first. The first is Daily Devotion. Your champion gains 1 blood for 1 mana. That seems okay. Like, that's, without knowing enough, this seems like the appropriate conversion rate. However, I don't know if you'd want to spend a card and 1 mana to do this. Maybe that's true. Given that we've seen things that can reduce costs, maybe there's some sort of combo that builds into I just pump out a bunch of blood, and then that's a weird statement. But maybe there's something there. So let's take a look at the second one. The Carrion Creeper. Creepy would be accurate, but it's an undead dragon, so I have to love it, because I love dragons and I love undead. So this is right up my alley. It's a 4 cost 4/3 with Flight and Consume, which I was saying incorrectly as Devour earlier, but gain 1 blood. If this consumed an undead, also add a zombie to your hand. That's actually pretty cool. For all the reasons that we talked about, Consume being valuable earlier, this also gives you additional benefits. The blood boost is important, and getting cards. So it's draw a card, but it's always a zombie. I like this. I like this a lot. I'm hoping that this is valuable, because I would love to use this card. This thing is so creepy, but it's cool. All right.
Rare.
Our next one is Will-O-Wisp. Okay. So, I'm just going to put out there this annoys me because it's not Will-O-Wisp or Will-O-the-Wisp or something like that. It's supposed to Will-O-Wisp, like the type of willow is in the tree, which maybe that's what it's supposed to be, but in my head it's Will-O-the-Wisp. But anyway, it's 2 for 2/1 Flight and Evade, so it's a more sturdy, evasive minion. Seems fine. It's also Fey, so we'll have to see if that tribe is a thing. So pack 1 down. 16 more to go. What do we got here? Got a bunch of dupes, but we have Trial by Fire. That doesn't look comfortable in the slightest, but it's a 2-cost Trial by Fire. Deal 5 damage to target friendly minion. If it survives, it gains +5 attack. So there's a much smaller version of this that costs 1. You can deal the 1 damage anywhere. It gives +2 attack. Obviously a better rate, obviously more versatile. I'm sure there are ways to leverage this, so I want to keep this in mind, but 5 damage is a lot of damage. That being said, it effectively functions as removal, but you're going to need to remove 2 things before you come out ahead on cards, and the ratio is still not great. That being said, it's also maybe 5 faiths damage, so who cares? Maybe you just end the game. So we have a Luminous Sprite, which we talked about before. You gain 2 health. And then what's our last rare? Our last rare is another Deranged Savant. So we have our set here, which is cool. Again, I really like these symmetrical cards. We'll have to see if there's a way to break them. So we'll look at pack number 3. Pack number 3 here. We have a bunch of dupes, leaving us with a mere single rare.
Rare.
We get a Prince of Rags. This is kind of fun, like the Broken Scepter. This is cool. I like this. It's a 1-cost 1/2 with Berry, gain 1 blood. It's noble. I don't know how I feel about this one. My initial reaction is negative because I just don't know if it's worth it unless we have some way to leverage getting multiple triggers out of the berry, as compared to things where it's a war cry and we get it immediately. Any of the times where it's delayed, your opponent has the opportunity to screw with the game plan. I don't know if there's going to be any remove from game effects in Runestrike that would avoid berry effects. Presumably there's going to be something like that eventually if it doesn't already exist, but also your opponent could just avoid it. You know, if you have to run this out there on 1, you don't want to. You want to have it block something, and then you're still kind of behind because this is clearly not going to do anything to that opposing minion because it's just going to die. I'm not a huge fan of this one, but we'll move on. See what other exciting things are in store. Bunch of dupes and a spell blade, which sounds cool. It's a 2-cost 1/3 that after you cast a spell, this gains +1. So again, the Myth faction seems to really hinge on this stuff, and there's a lot of potential for this where you could just make one of these things get out of hand. Now, it is small enough on the back end, which I can appreciate, so that this doesn't get wildly out of hand because of the snowbally nature of the way the combat system works in Runestrike at this time, that it just feels like there's a potential for these things to get really mean, and it's going to be very difficult to turn the tide. So therefore, having only 3 health allows you to get it out of combat without too much extra effort, depending on what your deck is filled with.
Rare.
The last rare in this pack is a Malice Fiend. This guy looks and sounds very mean. He has teeth on what looks like his tongue. Unless the jaw goes all the way down there. Regardless, this is unsettling on many levels. He's got like either tentacles or his tail coming out of his rib cage. Man, this demon is, wow. All right, so it's a 1-cost 2/3 already. Very happy about that. It's bigger than its cost, but its berry is deal 2 damage to adjacent friendly minions. This immediately screams to me it's a control card. The reason being is that it could come down, block, and live against an early aggressive card. And if you're not playing a whole lot of other things near each other or in general as a control deck, then you can just use this to help control the early board, and there is no downside. Now, if you have other things that have berry effects, you can leverage the fact that when this dies and kills your neighboring friendly minions, great. If not, you know, like I said, my first reaction is this is a controlled card, which is cool. I like these unique things that make you think about it. It's also one of the few demons we've seen so far, so we'll see if there's a demon tribal deck. Those can get very weird across a variety of games. We'll see how they work out again. Again, bunch of dupes.
Rare.
We got 3 rares. Our first rare is Entropy, which we talked about before. Potential niche card. Could be really cool. Could also be a surprise one to break a stalemate.
Rare.
Or what's looking like, maybe not a stalemate. Oh, it's an extra copy. I was talking, didn't catch what it was. Not a stalemate, but break serve. If you are behind, this will, you know, create a swing.
Rare.
And a Tomb Guardian, which is actually a really cool card. Another undead. We'll move on. Glad I have a set of those, we'll say. So what's in our next core pack? Bunch of dupes, but we have a Sword Shouter. It's weird. Got a lot of swords. It's kind of cool. It's a 4/4 for 4 with a war cry. Your other minions gain 1 attack until the end of your turn. A combat trick. I don't know if this is really worth it. There's a number of things that give buffs permanently, but this is attached to a body, and again, it's the way the combat system works. You can sometimes just, well, I wipe out your whole board and I advance mine. Go. This has the potential to be good. I don't know. I haven't seen these yet, but definitely a cool idea. A Mercenary is a 3/6 for 3, so we gotta be looking at a drawback. Each time a friendly minion is summoned, this loses 1 health. Again, this favors decks that don't have a lot of bodies, so it's entirely possible that this will be a control build card and that you can try and lock down the early game and prevent your opponent from allowing you to progress to that late game. It's definitely very interesting. I like this. These sort of things, I'm espousing the my experience from other games, how this typically works out. Whether that materializes in Runestrike is another thing, because of the fact that these won't always be dealing damage to multiple cards. It's entirely possible that you block with this, it gets damage, you kill the thing, and then your opponent either removes it, plays a blitz minion, something like that, and then it doesn't deal with a second minion. It's still sort of got a 2-for-1 depending on what they do, but you need to have X for 1s as control decks, and we'll have to see how these work out. Guy's got a lot of spikes going on, including
Rare.
yeah. Oh, we got a Harpy. I clicked next pack and skipped over one of them. My bad. Alright, so we have a Screaming Imp, which is a 3/1 for 3 with Strike. Destroy Screaming Imp and deal 2 damage to all enemies. Trigger this ability when this successfully attacks. Now, I believe, and I'm not sure, successfully attack requires dealing damage to a minion. Maybe not dealing damage, but you have to hit a minion. I don't think this triggers if you hit face. I'm not sure. But regardless, this being a potential board clear seems pretty important. Obviously, you can play it in a free lane, so that's why I think it requires punching a minion. In other words, your opponent can dodge it, or, you know, if you have to play it in front of something, you have to find some other way to ensure that they don't just kill it right away. But there's the potential for this to be a board wipe, so we have to keep our eyes out for it. Templar. Templar is a 4/3 for 4 with guard and Warcry. If you have a noble in play, this gains +3 health. So a 4/6 for 4 with guard. That seems pretty solid. Necessitating a noble, maybe that earlier Prince of Rags is now valuable simply because you have the option to have it on the table and ready to go. Oh, we see a purple. I see a purple. So let's go blue. Blue is Crazed Alchemist. I clicked on it real quick, so it is an extra, but it's a 3/2 for 2 with Warcry. Reduce your blood to 0, draw 1 rune for each blood loss. It's a unique way to expend other resources. Given that it's red, and that seems to be very much on the aggressive end of things, you do miss your blood abilities, but it's cool that it is a somewhat well-statted aggressive drop in that it has more attack than cost, but also that you can leverage these other resources and refuel in these ways. Maybe you intentionally go into a champion that doesn't really utilize their abilities all that much so that you can draw cards off of this. I like the idea, at least in concept, even if it doesn't necessarily work out as a valuable card.
Epic.
So our purple here is Bright Song. It's a 7-cost spell. Enemy minions are dealt damage equal to their own attack. So this is important on a number of levels. One, it's a board clear. And board clears are pretty much always important. But it's not a symmetrical board clear, it's asymmetrical because it's only dealing it to your opponent's side. Now, it may not necessarily clear their board. If they have a bunch of things with bigger butts than attacked, obviously it's not going away. But if you have your own board, you can use that to leverage it, or leverage this and continue with the board clear plan. Of note also, though, that I'll point out, and this is important for me as a new player, anybody else out there that is a new player, this tells you something about the way the game is designed. The proverbial Wrath of God effect, which is a card from Magic that costs 4 and says destroy all, well, creatures there, minions, they can't be regenerated. It's a card going back to the beginning of the game, and there have been, innumerable, well, they're innumerable, but you can count them, but there's been a lot of variations both in that game and other games, and it gives you a lot of information here on what the devs and how the play patterns are expected to play out, that at 7 is when the board is potentially cleared. Now, since it's one-sided, you can assume that the cost is a little bit inflated, but it does give us information to try and derive. So this is something to keep in the back of your head when you're playing, both A, to play around it, if at all possible, and B, just when you're building decks, you know you need to hit this sort of breakpoint, or, oh, I need to take a turn off here, or this thing changes because Bright Song exists. So that's really cool. So move on to our next pack. It's got a bunch of dupes. We have an Earth Elemental here, which is Guard and Vast. So it's another Earthen, 210 for 6. It seems kind of basic. I expect that we're probably not going to see too much of this, but maybe I'm wrong. It is pretty large sized. It can soak a bunch of attacks. It's Vast and Guard, so it's stopping everything. But I don't expect that we're going to see that. 6 is a lot.
Rare.
Our rare here is a Whimsy Spirit. It's a 2/2 for 3 with Fuse and Bury, draw 2 runes. So this is relevant for Myth, as well as a number of other things. Drawing cards is always going to be powerful. I wonder if it's going to be draw 4 if you fuse these. Now that's pay 6, draw 4, but pay 3, draw 2 is pretty common across a lot of games and relatively reasonable. The fact that it's a Bury effect, again, maybe your opponent can get around it, but since it carries a body, you could always soak some damage. So there's a lot of different ways that you could get a lot of advantages out of this. So this is pretty interesting. I don't know if this whole fuse concept is coming together yet. We've only seen things that are just, okay, these are the bodies, nothing that else relies on. If you have a fused minion, do X, or that sort of thing. Or give all your fused minions stuff. We'll see if those materialize.
Rare.
So we have Ebb Flow Rider. This is an Amazon Warrior. It's a 3-cost 2/3 War Cry, draw a rune. Counter, this is return to your hand. So there are a number of cards that I've seen that have counter bounce back to your hand, and that's pretty cool. At 2/3, it's going to be tough to make that happen, but it does draw cards. Now, the drawback here is most of the things that you would allow it to bounce would be cheap things, aka aggressive minions. Those you want it to stay on the board to fight. You want it to bounce and draw a bunch of cards against control so that you can find more tools. I think this one's going to have a hard time finding room unless you have ways to, I guess, boost the counter. I'm not really sure. Give it blitz. I don't know. It feels like this is going to be difficult to make it happen, but it does replace itself. So anything with this kind of war cry is definitely relevant to keep in mind. So move on to our next pack. We're getting through there. We're getting through them. So our next one, we have a bunch of dupes. We talked about Mercenary. Void Mage, we haven't talked about. It's a 5/5 for 6 with Warcry. Conjure a random spell from your Void. So you're getting it from either your cards that have been expended, discarded, used, destroyed, buried, whatever. Or I guess if you have none of those, it comes from your deck. I'm not sure how that'll work. Well, I'll have to double check on that. Again, new player things. So it's something I'll have to keep in mind. But this, I like the conjure effect, especially because, again, this is limited, but you're going to have even more control over it because you know what's left in your deck. Or when you're, I mean, you'll find out when you get it, but more to the point, when you build your deck, you know what's going into it, so you're finding stuff that you definitely want, as opposed to something. We'll come back to that. So another Screaming Imp.
Rare.
A Cyclops. 5/6 for 7 with Vast and Dangerous. So this deals double damage to champions. I'm not super enthusiastic about this. Yes, it's a big threat. It also costs $1 billion. Because it can block anything, it I don't know. This just feels like it costs too much. For turn 7, I feel like I want something that is advancing the board. 6 is even pushing it, but at least this is replacing itself. And again, you can build into certain combos. 7 for just a body that punches. It doesn't seem like it's going to be enough, but we'll see. But let's actually see what this orange is.
Legendary.
Apocalypse. That looks awesome. Cost 10. Destroy all minions. Destroy all minions again. Now that seems redundant, but Resurrect is a thing, and this deals with that. And this is really cool. Now for 10, is that worth it for 10? I don't know. I don't know how many games get that late. I would imagine that control mirrors are going to see this. Most of my games, because I mentioned on several occasions already that I've been playing aggro, don't quite get there, but maybe this is a thing. Maybe it is. We'll have to see. But this is really cool. I like this. And it's a legendary, so you got to be excited about that. Alright, so let's move on. Is that our first legendary? I think that's our first legendary. We got a few epic. We got 2 rares.
Rare.
Got Meteor Storm. All enemy minions are dealt 6 damage. The wording on this is kind of interesting, only because of the syntax. We all know what it does. It costs 8, which is a lot, but 6 probably clears their board. So again, taking note of when board clears happen, we saw 7, we now see 8, we saw 10. So where these different things happen are pretty cool, and it's important to keep in mind when you're playing certain matchups. So if you're playing against a Chaos leaning, a Chaos included control deck, or other late game deck, some refer to them as Greed Lord decks. That isn't always accurate, but point is that going into turn 8, you got to be careful that your board might get wiped.
Rare.
The other rare is Spirit Surge, which is apparently an extra, and I didn't click fast enough, so we'll move on to the next one. What do we got next? Got 3 rares. We got a Fungoid, though. Fungoid is a 2/4 for 3 with Bury. Your minions restore 1 health, and enemy minions lose 1 health. I like the idea that it's a potential sweep. It allows it to trade with things that it might not ordinarily trade with, so you could play this in front of a 1 health minion that'll kill it. It'll still get it. It also allows your minions to potentially survive other things. I don't know how often that'll happen because, again, the way the combat works, but knocking off 1 health from everything on the other side of the board is cool. It's cheaply cost enough to matter against aggro. I like it. We talked about Sword Shouter, but Dread Pirate, 3 cost 3/2 with Warcry. Enemy champion loses 1 blood. We saw a 3/2 for 2 that consumes your blood to draw cards, which is any context that you're going to be playing it presumably is going to be a positive. Obviously, you have to pay a cost, but we're now having the cost baked into mana instead of blood. It is disruption, though. And I like the idea that you can, again, screw with your opponent's stuff there. So let's take a look at our 3 rares.
Rare.
Bottom one first. Desperate Charge. Until end of turn, your minions get +4 attack. At the end of your turn, reduce their health to 1 with a 4 cost. I actually like this. The assumption here, of course, is that you're going to sweep your opponent's board, or you risk just dying on the counterattack. I think that's fine. Aggro decks probably want this so that they can push damage, whether it's off lane or clearing out blockers, as mentioned. Additionally, reducing it to 1 health probably doesn't matter all that much in a lot of scenarios because your minions were likely to die anyway, being the aggressive deck. I could definitely see where this fits, but that's experience from other card games talking. We'll have to see whether it matters too much in Runestrike.
Rare.
So we have Petrified Egg, which is a 0/2 for 2 with Still and Rally. Replace this minion with an Undead Crocodile. Now, unfortunately, I don't know what the hell the Undead Crocodile looks like. I wish it would, do a pop-out and show me what the other card is. But unfortunately, we can't do that. Maybe we can look it up later, but I'm curious what this looks like. The idea of an Undead Crocodile sounds like it's probably going to have high attack, low defense, but maybe not. Given that it's a rally ability and it's small enough, hopefully the payoff is worth it because clearly, this could die to somebody looking at it funny. So our last rare in this pack is Void Queen. It's a 2/4 for 4. After you discard a rune, draw a card. So we haven't seen many cycle abilities, aka you discard a card, draw a card, or discard for other effect up to this point. It's a Rogue Noble, so it has some interesting keywords, but I'm not sure where this fits yet. And I'm not sure if there's a mechanic yet that benefits you discarding cards other than this one. So I'm not sure what this is a payoff for, but obviously it's an engine for something. A lot of the myth cards seem to be engines, so this is something that we may have to put aside until we find what the gas for the said engine is. So move on to our next pack. Got some blues. We have Dagger Slayer. So are you slaying with daggers or are you slaying daggers? I don't know. Regardless, it's a 1/2 for 1 that deals 1 to an opposing minion when it comes out. Potential removal. I like it. I haven't seen too many minions with 1 health, although we were just talking about Desperate Charge that could reduce them to 1. But if they're not innately 1 health, then I don't know how much popularity this is going to have. Obviously, you could help finish something off, but not a huge fan yet.
Rare.
Dark Sacrifice. So it's a 0 cost. Target friendly minion is destroyed, gain 2 blood. This is relevant for a number of reasons. Like we were talking about for consume, it can help free up slots so that you can actually continue playing cards. It also is a blood generation outlet, which can be very important. This seems like it could justify slots in your deck.
Rare.
The last rare for this pack is Binding Spirit, which we talked about earlier. We get shield on Berry. It's okay. It seems undercosted, overcosted. So the wrong thing, literally the opposite thing. Seems like it costs too much for what it does, but we'll see. We have 1 rare in this pack, and it's Cyclops. I'm not too excited about Cyclops. So this is a new one, Fallen Fairy. It's a 1/2 for 1. With Veil and Berry, give a random Fae in your hand +1/+1. It's cool because it comes out early enough that you can play it, well, on turn 1. That would be about as early as you could play something. And if you're building this Fae strategy, which we haven't seen too many tools for outside of the Codal, but it seems reasonable. And Veil, I would assume, is part of the Fae, Fairy keyword. So this is pretty interesting. I like this. I don't know if the body and the effect are enough, but if you're running that tribe, then I would expect that this at least gets a consideration.
Rare.
And the last rare for this pack is Battle Mage, and this guy looks cool. Apparently fighting some elementals or something, or maybe he's casting these spells. Like he's freezing this guy and bolting somebody else, incinerated somebody else. It's a 4/4 for 5 with strike. Deals 1 damage to all enemy minions. This is actually kind of cool. So it essentially is a 5 attack minion when attacking other minions. And it's a potential board clear. The problem is again, if I'm interpreting strike correctly, where you have to hit a body, your opponent's just going to dodge this, which I guess is an invasion ability, a hidden text on this card in and of itself that your opponent is not going to want to try and block it. But it means that you're probably never getting the strike ability that you wanted. So this may be a challenge to make it materialize, unless you have some way to get it to attack this turn, such as ambush or something along those lines. So we're getting towards the end. Bunch of extras. Got 3 rares.
Rare.
Spell shield. Until your next turn, friendly minions gain Veil. It seems reasonable if you protect 2 things, but the problem is you're very much banking on, unless you saw your opponent, you know, they revealed something that was going to happen. You only get the protection for 1 turn, but 1 turn can be enough to gain enough tempo to do something. So this is something to keep in mind, but obviously not necessarily going to show up in everything, I don't think. I could be wrong there.
Rare.
So marked for death. Target a minion, at the end of its turn, it dies. It costs 4, so again, this informs us about the developer's opinions of what removal should cost. Since it's end of turn, the minion will still get to attack, so this is kind of interesting. You're not going to get the opportunity to remove something outright and prevent it from doing whatever mean thing it was going to do, up to and including just punching the snot out of you and your other minions, but it does have the option to just cleanly eliminate something, assuming your opponent doesn't intervene in the interim.
Rare.
Mustering rounds. We talked about this earlier. I do like this. This seems like it has potential. All right, next to last core pack. We got a bunch of dupes. We have Sword Sworn. It's a 1/3 guard for 1. I assume there would be something like this at some point. This is okay.
Rare.
Necromancer. Alright, you have my attention. This is a 1/7 for 6. Whenever an enemy minion dies, summon a skeleton minion to an empty slot. That's actually kind of cool. The skeletons naturally aren't going to be super exciting, but you can play this on a turn where you know you're going to eat a bunch of your opponent's guys and then get some bodies. The problem is this presumably would have to be in, it doesn't have to be in an empty lane, but it's going to be in what was an empty lane, and then you obviously would have another lane where you're trading minions. You could, of course, get something out of hand. We saw Marked for Death earlier, so there's the potential that you could do something along those lines. Skeletons aren't going to be that exciting, but anything where you're generating these free tokens could have potential. So we'll move on to our last core pack. Bunch of dupes. Oh, we got a purple. It's a good way to end it.
Rare.
A Diabolical Blossom. That thing looks like a Legend of Zelda bad guy. But it's a 0/4 for 3 with Still and Rally. This gains 1 health. Recover. A random enemy minion gains Suffer 1. This is interesting because it happens immediately, and I wonder, I don't know how the keywords work in this game, as in do they stack. So let's say they have 5 minions out. You give 1, Suffer 1. This lives. Can that same minion get Suffer 1 again? And if it does it gain Suffer 2? Or is it going to try and choose a different minion every time? Or how does that work? This is interesting. I like the concept. It's an Earthen Demon also, which is kind of interesting. I like the concept, but I don't think this is really going to be great because it's just very slow across the board. The Suffer value is not very high, regardless of whether it stacks. It can get something anywhere on the board because it's a random minion. It does heal itself, but odds are, with only 4 health, like, it's going to die in 2 hits to most things, I would think. I'm not super enthusiastic about this. It's cool, but I don't know. And then what's our... Oh, this looks cool. It's a dragon. This is the Dread Striker. It's a 7-cost 4/7 with flight. Although it looks like it's just big enough that it doesn't need flight. Because this is a little castle here at the bottom. At the beginning of your attack phase, this doubles its attack until the end of your turn. So it's really an 8/7 when it attacks, which is very interesting. I wonder what cards that you could play benefit from this being a lower attack, or it dodges by having a lower attack otherwise. Now, regardless, it also plays well with buffs. So you could just play any buff on it and you get double value out of it. So that's also very interesting. I like this. This is cool. More dragons. I'm a fan of dragons. So that's all the core packs. We're going to take a look at the season pack. Let's see what we get here.
Epic.
We get a Cull of the Week, which is also a purple. This is a 3-cost, destroy both the enemy minion and friendly minion with the lowest attack. Now, what's cool about these effects is, again, symmetry. You can break the symmetry because you get to choose when it's played and you're preparing for it. So what if you just don't have a minion in play? Or you just don't care about your low-cost minion because it has a berry effect or something like that. This is pretty cool. Plus, it's only 3 costs, so you could obviously, say they play a 2-drop and then buff it up real big. You go, okay, well, I don't care. That happens to be the only thing you played because you spent your time buffing up a single card as opposed to playing multiple threats. It's gone. So I like this. This is pretty cool removal. Again, information about where the devs feel that targeted removal, indirect removal like this should be. So now, the last thing we're going to open is the Legend Pack. Let's see how legendary the Legend Pack is. Pretty legendary.
Legendary.
Legendary. This is the Sun Chariot. It's a 7-cost 4/6 with flight speed and strike gain +1/+1. So it attacks twice, it has evasion, and when it successfully attacks, it gets bigger. Now again, strike, I have to verify, but I'm pretty sure you have to punch a minion, so it's unlikely that this is going to get something, but it is dealing 8 as an evasive card. That's a lot. So this is pretty cool. I like this. I'm not sure where it's going to fit because understandably the body has to compensate for the fact that it has 3 positive effects, keywords, whatever. But it's pretty cool. It's also a spirit, so if there is spirit synergy, maybe you can use those fuse things to build into this somehow. I'm not sure how exactly that would work, but maybe there are other cards that benefit this tribe and help it out. So the Legendary Pack, or the Legend Pack, was pretty legendary. Seems good. So, that'll do it for the pack opening. It's the first time that I'm doing one of these, so if you enjoyed it, definitely let me know. I'll be streaming more Runestrike going forward and trying to produce other content for it, so if you want to see certain things, or you have comments about the existing content, then definitely let me know, because I want to be producing things that the community finds both enjoyable, informative, and useful. So, with that, we're going to close up shop. As always, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and Black Lives Matter.